thank you everyone for coming tonight. It is hard enough as it is to be social, but then to get back on your computer to be social and attend a book event after you've been on your computer doing work, school, what have you, it means a lot. So we appreciate you taking your valuable time this evening to join Abby and Emily. I am Amanda. I'm a bookseller at Belmont Books. I'm a romance lover and reader. And I'm so happy to be introducing both of these authors. Before we get into that, Belmont Books is an independent bookstore in the greater Boston area. We have a pretty robust events calendar now that things have gone rather digital. Silver linings. Next week, we have an amazing event. If you're a romance reader, you might have seen this book going around already. It's Denny S. Bryce's Wild Women in the Blues. Gorgeous cover with a flapper and an emerald green dress. You may have seen it around. So we're doing an event with her next Tuesday at 7. And then we have a nonfiction event with Amy Stewart and Erica Engelhaupt about her book called Gory Details: Adventures from the Dark Side of Science. So if you like really niche, bizarre nonfiction, that will also be a pretty great event. And Amy Stewart is wonderful. She did The Drunken Botanist, which is an amazing nonfiction book. So we hope you'll join us for both of those. And then I'm going to introduce both of these authors. They are going to talk for about 45 minutes. I will disappear into the shadows and then come back at quarter till to help divvy up questions. So if you do have questions for Abby or Emily or both of them, there is a little Q&A function in the bottom of the chat or the bottom of your window. It looks like 2 speech bubbles and it says Q&A. If you could put your questions in there, that would be super helpful, just so they don't get lost in the chat, but I'll be monitoring the chat anyway. So yeah, let's get into the intros. Abby Jimenez is a Food Network winner and USA Today best-selling author. She founded Nadia Cakes out of her home kitchen back in 2007. I'm sure we've all seen the viral Veggiode cake. If you haven't, please do yourself a favor and Google it after this event. I feel like since Abby's debut, she's been on quite the roll when it comes to releases, just firing them out. So the romance community is lucky to have her. Emily Henry writes stories about love and family for both teens and adults. She studied creative writing at Hope College and the New York Center for Art and Media Studies. She now spends most of her time in Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm sure we are also all anticipating Emily's next book, People We Meet on Vacation, which comes out in May, right, Emily?
May 11th, yep.
Yes. So I'm sure Emily will be doing a few virtual events for that. So definitely keep in touch with her on Instagram, which is, Emily Henry Writes on Instagram. And I'm sure she'll be posting about all of her upcoming dates for her tour. So I'm going to turn over to Abby and Emily, and I will be back a little later.
Yay! Happy release week, Abby.
Thank you. I'm so excited you're doing this with me. My publisher asked me, who do you want for your launch week? And I was like, I want Casey McQuiston and I want Emily Henry. And I got you both. And I'm so excited.
I was honored to be asked. I mean, we have to get this out of the way, even though I already said this in private. Everyone here needs to know I am obsessed with Life's Too Short. I had never read one of Abby's books before. And yeah, we kind of had a thing where our editors were like, you should send your books to each other, read them for early blurbs and all that kind of thing. And Abby was messaging me while she was reading mine. And just from her messages, I was like, this person is magnetic. I cannot wait to read what she writes. And within the first chapter of Life's Too Short, I was sort of like, oh my gosh, I'm in trouble. I'm going to be reading everything of hers from now on, one more person to just be my auto buy list forever. I love this book and I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
I know. I was saying also before we started this chat that I was obsessed with you, reading your book, because I don't read a lot of books with my eyes. I do mostly audiobooks, which incidentally, while we were sitting here, I just pre-ordered the audiobook of your book, and because I already have the paperback coming, but I pre-ordered the audiobook because I wanted to like slide right into my Audible the second it hits. But I was obsessed with your book, and it's really hard for me to read like digital versions or even paperback copies. I just don't do it a lot. And I was like, I'm going to give it a try. And I was obsessed. I could not put it down. I read it in a day. I wrote you like the biggest freaking review ever, which I also don't hardly ever do since I'm so busy to write reviews. I think my reviews like at the very top of your good
Yes.
reviews. Yeah, I loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. So I'm glad I did not come off as like a weirdo when I was sliding into your DMs, because I felt like a weirdo because I was super, like I'm a super
You're the perfect amount of weirdo.
Okay,
I'll say that. She can hang. That's how I felt.
fine line between magnetic personality and like creepy. So I'm glad.
That one movie with Jim Carrey, The Cable Man. You can go the Cable Man route. If you haven't seen it, I don't recommend it, really. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I have so many questions I want to ask you. And like for everyone watching, like, even though we're obsessed with each other, this is our first time meeting. So you're basically just like at our dinner date. You're welcome. We're so happy to have you here. And I just figured, like, do you want to start? I know everyone here like knows about Life's Too Short, but do you want to kind of like pitch it for people?
Yeah, so Life's Too Short. Okay. When I was pitching this book to my editor, I'm like, all right, so here's the deal. She might be dying. And my editor was like, and this is funny. I'm like, it's funny. Just trust me. It's funny. The book is about Vanessa Price. She's an inspirational YouTuber. And she's inspirational because she has a family history of ALS. Her mother died of it. Her sister died of it. Her aunt died of it. She has a 50% chance of inheriting the gene, and she has no way to test for it. So she lives every day not knowing if this is going to be the last time she's doing a thing. And she just chooses to live her life like each day is important. Each day is her last. She doesn't save anything for later. She's this incredibly charismatic and inspiring young woman. And she's grounded from her international vlogging travels when her sister dumps her newborn baby on Vanessa's doorstep. And the book opens up with the baby's crying in her apartment, and her next door neighbor, Adrienne Copeland, shows up at 4 o'clock in the morning to ask her if she needs help. And the two of them fall into this really slow burn, friends to lovers, found family kind of routine. And it's happy and it's sad, and you will laugh and you will cry. And I think this is my best book yet. I absolutely love these characters. Oh, and you have to listen to the audiobook because the narration is fire. It's so good.
That's so exhilarating to me. I can't wait to listen to it again, because I'm like getting to the point like with you where it's just like my eyes are tired all the time. I want more audiobooks. Yeah, like honestly, from the first chapter, like I said, it's like you have such a strong voice, but I think the thing that you do best is you make these really fully fleshed out characters. And from the very first chapter, that introduction with Vanessa and her niece was just like, I am obsessed. That's all. But also I think like it's really interesting to me that you write these really complex family situations, and it's like somehow the romance is still like front and center, you know, it's like the story that you're following, but every character in your book was so fully realized, and it's such a complex situation. And we're going to go spoiler light because we know some of you got lucky and got your book early, but some of you haven't read yet. But just the fact of, yeah, her complicated relationship with her sister and her niece, and that whole dynamic of her kind of being like a caretaker, even while having this huge thing looming over her, and how that like feeds into their relationship. And I don't know, I mean, it's just, it's so lovely. It feels so real. And I don't know how you do it, but I'm curious, like the starting point of the story, you said like, so you talked to your editor and you're like, she thinks she's dying. Was that the very first kernel of her story, of Vanessa's story?
So actually, I had written another book. I wrote a book that I intended to be the third in this series.
Wow.
And that book ended up getting trunked. And Adrian was a central character in that book. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to publish this book, but I have this character that I love. I'm going to write a book for him. So I built Life's Too Short around Adrian, which is not what I normally do. Normally I create my heroine first, and then I write the man that's perfect for her. And in this circumstance, I actually wrote the woman that was perfect for Adrian, because I knew who he was. I knew so well who he was. And what he needed was, he needed somebody who was going to teach him how to live a different kind of life. He's very straight-laced. He's a total workaholic. The guy he never takes vacations. And he meets Vanessa, and she's just the complete polar opposite. No plans, flies by the seat of her pants. That was the woman that he needed. And, for such a control freak, I had asked myself, like, what would be his biggest challenge in a relationship? It would be to lose control. And, what greater loss of control than being in love with somebody who's got a severe, possibly terminal health issue? There's nothing you can do. That was going to be his greatest challenge as a character, was to learn how to deal with that or cope with that, or see if he can even make it through that to have a romance with this person. So that was the kernel. But I remember my editor and I talking about it, and she's like, it's so hard with your books, because it's like, okay, so like she can't have babies, but trust me, it's funny. Okay. Or like her fiance died tragically, but trust me, it's funny. This one, it's the same thing.
You're funny. So you're able to write. I mean, I feel like it's, in a way, I do think like our books are kind of cousins, where it's like the characters are funny. Like Vanessa's situation, not funny. Like not so hilarious. But like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I feel like the niche that you've like carved for yourself, and why people like are always clamoring for more of your books, and why now I am, is just the fact that you can take your readers to somewhere that's so much darker than maybe the average like rom-com or romance even. But there's so much hope. And I don't really even know how you strike that balance, because I think I told you after I read this book, I am a huge hypochondriac, like massive. And a few months before I read this book, I actually like lost feeling in one of my legs and was like, okay, I'm dying. And it ended up being like a pinched nerve basically, but for like 3 months I was dying. And then I read this book and was just like, I don't know, it spoke to all of my anxieties, but it was like this hug of a book that felt like this is confronting like this very serious thing in life, instead of just avoiding it and not looking at it. And it was such a healing, cathartic experience for me to read this book, where it's like, we're not guaranteeing that her life goes any certain way, but you're being invited to see like the joy of her life and how she copes with like this possibility. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like, it's so interesting to me that that's sort of the angle that all of your books take, where it's like, here's the really, really hard thing, and here's how this character pushes through that, and like how they make their life this beautiful story.
Yeah, when I get the audiobook of my books, I was just telling this to my husband today, and I listened to it, it doesn't feel like it's a book I've written. It's the weirdest thing. It's like, because it's not the format that I'm used to looking at it or, experiencing it in. So when I get the audiobook, it truly feels like I'm reading someone else's book. And when I was listening to it, I was so inspired by Vanessa. I was like, God, I gotta live more like Vanessa. And like, I wrote Vanessa, so I should know how to do this for myself. But she's got such a breath of fresh air approach to life, just the way that she thinks about things. Like, she refuses to, if she's going to be late, she refuses to be stressed about being late until she's actually late. If you're supposed to be somewhere at 2:00 and it's 1:45 and you're going to be late, well, why are you stressing about it 1:45? Because it hasn't even happened yet. Stress about it after it's happened. Just like these little like life hacks that she has for her way of living. And I find those things so helpful, especially with all the challenges that we've gone through in the past year. And things are so hard. How Vanessa just seizes every day. But really the way that I write these characters is, I think, all my characters, they live their lives through the same lens that I live my life. I mean, you can't control the bad things that happen to you. All you can do is decide how you're going to get through them and what attitude you're going to take towards these things. And, I tend to be very like sarcastic and just kind of laugh at stuff. And, and that's how my characters, I funnel that through my characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the kind of book that will give you like a good hard cry, but then afterward you just like do feel better equipped for life, or at least I did. Like, I totally agree. And I actually, one of the questions that I wrote down for you was, I really wanted to know if you are a person who burns the fancy candle, because Vanessa at one point is talking about like, if you have the nice bottle of wine, if you have the fancy candle, like what are you waiting for basically? And I was like, I wonder if Abby, you were saying kind of you wanted to be more like Vanessa, but is there anything like that you kind of seeded through that you're like, oh, that's just me, that's how I like handle this thing?
I actually do burn the expensive candle, but because I have this like life philosophy that if you save the best for last, someone else takes it.
Yeah.
You know, because it's so true. If you save like, you know, the cupcake that you want to eat,
Yes.
if someone else freaking takes it. So enjoy what you have
So
before
real.
someone else takes it. And yeah, I tend to do that. Because why wait? You know, why just let it sit around and wait for a special occasion, you know, when you can just enjoy things now as they come. But, you know, there's some things that Vanessa does, like I tend to ruminate. That's a thing that I do. I ruminate. You know, I get fixated on something and I can't stop thinking about it. And it's, you know, 'cause it's something negative and it just bothers me and eats away at me. And one thing that Vanessa does is she refuses to dwell on things. She refuses to do it. And I find when I make a conscious effort to not do that, to just shut off my brain and say, no, I'm not going to worry about this thing. I'm not going to obsess about this thing. It is so like mentally helpful to live your life in that way, to just decide that you are not going to succumb, you know, to those negative thoughts or whatever's happening around you, and to just redirect your focus onto something else. And Vanessa's really, really good at doing that. That's been like that's how she lives her life. Basically, she refuses to accept negativity. Just she rebounds quickly and moves on to something else that's going to make her happy. So that is something I think I could do a little bit better.
So we got both answers. You do burn the candle, but sometimes you ruminate.
Yes.
I mean, I think like that again is why it's so interesting to me, because obviously when you wrote this book, nobody knew COVID was going to happen. I mean, hopefully no one knew, but it's such a perfect timely read, I think, because this past year has been such a time of like just having to know you don't know what the future looks like, and having to choose to live in the present and to kind of work with what you've got. And again, like I was reading this toward the beginning of quarantine, and it was just the perfect read for me then. And I think that it's the perfect read still, because now like everybody who hasn't read it yet, like you're just going to want to do the things that Vanessa does, like to take the trips that Vanessa has taken, like just live that life. I don't know, it must feel like kind of strange, I would guess, for it to be coming out now. Like, has COVID or just like the weirdness of this year, how's it been affecting release so far? Like, how does that feel to have this book coming out when it's like everybody's just starting to like have hope again for the future?
You know, it's funny because I feel like this book would have been even better like 6 months ago, because it's got such like an inspiring message. And really Vanessa and Adrian they're trapped in their apartments. I mean, that's really most of the book is, you know, she's grounded from her normal adventures, just like we're all grounded from our normal adventures, and she finds joy anyway. But I still think that it is a very good time for this book. You know, it kind of sucked because I like writing real places into my books because I like to help small businesses. And I had all of these fabulous restaurants, because Adrian and Vanessa are foodies, had all these fabulous restaurants written into the book, and I had to take them out because they were closing. Like these restaurants were closing. And I was like, ugh. So I had to fictionalize a lot of the restaurants. I did leave one, the bed and breakfast that Vanessa stays at is a real bed and breakfast. So you can look that one up and see the room that she stays in. But yeah, COVID has just been a very weird time. But I do feel like this year feels a lot less chaotic, because I did release the book in April of last year as well. And that was just a mess. It was like so stressful, even just doing like the virtual events. We weren't used to doing them.
Right. It was like 3 weeks had gone by since the whole world had changed. And they're like, figure this out. You had it all scheduled.
Yeah. It was so stressful. And now we're used to it. You know, we've got our ring lights and we know where to set up. And it's like, well, this is old hat. I'm wearing pajama bottoms right now. We were talking about this before we started. Emily is actually wearing real pants, but I'm in pajama bottoms.
Witness me. Hero.
But yeah, I think this launch is going very, very well. And I'm very excited for everyone to read this book.
Yeah, they're going to love it. I know a lot of people in here have already read it, because I'm seeing all these comments pop up about people just saying they want to be more like Vanessa, or they love Vanessa. And like, obviously it's so interesting, because it's like Adrian is such a stable, like lovely guy. And he's like the perfect romance hero. But it's also funny because of course we're going to be talking about Vanessa like so much, because she's just like in your face, like so bright, like a starburst of a human being. And it's such a fun dynamic between them. And yeah, people are already obsessed with it, but they're going to be more obsessed. I'm like trying to look at my list of things that I definitely needed to know from you. I am curious. So because your books, like they're in this overlap, I would say, between, you know, general fiction or women's fiction and romance, in that you're always kind of tackling some other like serious subject matter or family dynamic or what have you. And I'm really curious because I've never done an event with you before. Like if you started out knowing like I'm going to write romance, like your journey to now who we know as Abby Jimenez, like your writing journey, were you always a romance reader? Were you writing romance before you published? Like how did that unfold?
Well, I was not a writer. I took creative writing in high school, and I was in honors English, and I was an avid reader though. From like my earliest age, I was an avid reader. And in high school, I would read like historical romances. I just blazed through them. I absolutely love those. And I always loved the romance in a story or in a movie, but I never aspired to be an author in any way, shape, or form. That was never a dream I had. I felt like that was like something that people like you do that went to school for this, like, like you, and I just didn't. Like, I never went to college for anything. And I had this idea for this YA romance, this like, dystopian YA romance that I just had in my brain. And I went on a camping trip with my kids, and we were rained in, we were stuck in a tent. And I started telling my kids this story that I had thought up. And my daughter was like, "You got to go home and write it down, Mom, go home and write it down." So I went home and I started writing this YA romance. And every day she would come home from school and I would read her the chapters that I wrote. And it was horrible. I'm sure many of you guys, anyone who's tuned into one of my Zooms before, hears me talk about this absolutely like awful YA. It was 300,000 words. Yeah. And Emily's laughing because I know like the layperson may not know how long that is, but that is 3 of these.
Yeah,
Okay? That's
like, yeah. 300% of what it should be.
88,000 words. Okay. So just to give you an idea of exactly how long that was, it was like total word vomit. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. And
the first time you sat down to write a book, you finished.
Oh, I finished it. Yeah. It was terrible. And I actually queried this hot mess, which horrifies me now. Like I retroactively cringe at this. And the literary agent really, politely told me that I might benefit from getting some critique partners. So I went online and I found this group called Critique Circle. And this is a big question that everybody asks, what's your number one advice for aspiring writers? Get on Critique Circle. That site has every resource you could ever need. They teach you how to write a query letter. They teach you how to write, what the differences are between trade publishing and self-publishing and how to do both. You'll get critique partners on there, and those people help shape your work. And it was like a 6-month boot camp where I went on the site and I learned to write in 6 months.
That's amazing.
And I started submitting that book, The Horrible YA. And within like a week, everyone was like, "Okay, this is really bad, but your dialogue is really good." Yeah. And so I was like, "Okay, you know what? You guys are the second people telling me this book sucks. So I'm just going to throw it out and I'm going to start again. And I'm going to write a contemporary romance set in modern day. I'm going to lean really heavily on the dialogue that I know I do really well. I'm going to make it first person because my first attempt was third person. I'm going to write in first person. I'm going to do dual narratives. And I sat down and I wrote this book full of really great, witty, bantery dialogue. And that book was the Happy Ever After playlist. And it got such a great reception on Critique Circle. So many people were reading it. And it was like this cult favorite on the site. It was the #1 most read book on the site for the 14 weeks that I ran it through. So I got the courage to query this again. Only this time I did it right because I knew how to do it because I was on Critique Circle. And I ended up getting an agent. And then while we were in submissions for the Happy Ever After playlist, I wrote The Friend Zone. So by the time I got a book deal, I had these 2 books like ready to go. So that was my writing journey. It is all very shocking to me, which is kind of funny because like I started my bakeries the same way. Like I had no background in baking. I never went to culinary school. It was something I liked to do. So I like obsessively practiced it until I got really good at it. And I started a cake business out of my house. And I remember being like 6 months into this cake business out of my house and being like, "Okay, I'm a cake decorator. This is weird." Like 6 months ago, this wasn't even something I like ever aspired or thought of doing. And the book thing is very much like that for me. I want you guys to know. I'm like, I'm an author. This is so weird.
I mean, that's what you were saying when you're like, "Oh, like I didn't go to school." Like you went to school, whatever. When people ask me for writing advice, I never school is not a part of it. Like I think it's helpful I'm not discouraging anyone who wants to do the creative writing program. They're really fun. But I think what you described, it's like, it kind of takes that obsessive personality and that like self-motivation, because what you just described is like unreal. Like to sit down and write a 300,000 word book, no matter how badly, like that is incredible. And for then you to turn around and pivot, and like your next book, you're like, here's what didn't work, here's my list, like very methodically, just like, I know what to do differently this time. I don't know, that takes like that really is kind of what I think it takes. Like it takes obsession.
Yeah. And I am extremely tenacious. I will tell you this. Like I have like this like obsessive, tenacious personality, and I rebound very quickly from like bad things. So like when I get this, when everyone told me that book sucked and it was this huge book that I spent so much time on, I was like, okay, it sucks. Let's pivot. Like, let's figure out what else. And I mean, I was on Critique Circle. I'm not kidding you. 12 hours a day for 6 months straight.
Oh my
12 hours a day. My husband was like, I'm going to divorce you.
God.
I'm just kidding. He did not like it though. I mean, honestly, it was like I was in a boot camp for 6 months because it was a tit for tat community. So everybody that was reading my work, I had to read their work and write critiques for their books. And it was like this constant, like, it was just a ton of work. But yeah, I think that for many things, you can be successful just through sheer determination and will. And if you love something, practice the crap out of it, because you can get really, really good at it. And you don't necessarily need to go to school for it. And I mean, like I've done this twice now. So I started bakeries.
It's not a fluke. Like
yeah, I started bakeries and now I'm an author, I guess. So
yeah, you're an author 3 times over and started bakeries. Like, yeah, you have the advice to give. People need to take that. Yeah, it's so interesting, because it's like you can get all of the training in the world, but in the end, nobody's going to sit down and look over your shoulder and make you do the work. So you sitting at the computer for 12 hours a day, it's like that is pretty much like what it looks like still, I would imagine. Like, I don't know what your like daily, we should talk about that next, your daily writing process, or not daily, whatever, your writing process. But it's like, when it comes down to it, this is self-employment. There's no one there to really make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing.
yeah,
And it's always kind of going to be like that, even once you have an editor who's like waiting for your next thing. Like it comes down to you every time.
it really does. And I was talking to somebody about the difference between, they're like, how do you juggle Nadia cakes and then the book thing? Well, here's the difference. Nadia cakes, I can hire people to do jobs. Okay. I can hire bakers and train them. I can hire managers and train them. We've got excellent talent in our stores. That's how I manage Nadia cakes, is I hire people, empower them, pay them well, treat them well, and then they can do that job for me. Yeah. But as a writer, nobody can do that job for me. I have to do that job. So you really do have to be, it can't be delegated out. It can't be given to someone else. Like, I have to write the book, so you really do have to be disciplined. You've got to figure out what your processes are going to be and figure out what works for you, because you've got deadlines and you have to do it. No one's going to do it for you.
So are you a plotter or a pantser? Like, what's your usual approach?
I would say at this point, I would say I'm a plotter. I do not write outlines really. Like, I will send my editor a synopsis, because I found when I don't send her a synopsis, I end up writing things that she does not like, and then I have to throw that away and start again. So now I actually give her like, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And it's pretty, it's detailed. It's like broad stroke stuff, but what do you think? But I think a lot. Like, when I'm thinking about a book, I'm not sitting down and writing things. I'm not outlining chapters. I'm just thinking about it. Like right now I'm working on my 5th book. It's called Just My Type. And I will stop for weeks at a time and write absolutely nothing, because all I am doing is thinking. I'm just thinking about, like, who is this character? Who is she? Who is he? What are their challenges? Who are these people? And by the time I sit down and I actually write something down, I know these people so well. And that's why you feel like the families and the side characters of my book are so fleshed out. Yeah. Because I do know them. I know them extremely well. I feel like I know these people, like their story has been living in my brain, and all I'm doing is just writing down something that already happened. That's how I feel by the time I sit down and I start writing it.
That's amazing. I mean, it does read like that. That's, I think, why they do just feel like real people. You can tell, I'm sure there's stuff that doesn't make it onto the page even, that you know about them, and that like really informs the way that they talk, the way they interact, and all of that.
Yeah.
Is there like, so is there something that you do? Like, I really related to what you were saying about just thinking, but I have a hard time, like, I feel guilty. I'm like, this doesn't count. I'm not writing. But there are times where I just have to pace or like lay on the floor and just groan and think. But is there like a go-to activity that you would do if you need to think through something, or that you find really gets you like into the right headspace? Or like, do you ever you do this kind of brainstorming or even daydreaming like while you're baking? Or is that like a very active thing for you?
I just live my life.
Yeah.
I love cooking. So during the times where I'm thinking, you guys will notice that there's like a big uptick in my Instagram with me posting like, oh, look what I'm making for dinner. I'll just live my life. I go on a lot of walks. I love being outside, and my husband has like a hunting dog, so I take her out a lot. I'm just living my life, and I'm thinking as I'm living my life. I'm watching shows, I'm listening to other people's books, like all of these things help like grow the story in my head. Um, if you guys are unaware, I have a group on Facebook. It's like my reader group. And then I have side groups for each of my books. So I've got a group for the Happy Ever After playlist and a group for Life's Too Short. And I put little tidbits in there. So Emily, when you said, I'm sure there's things that don't even make it onto the page, I talk about those things in my group. Like, for example, the Happy Ever After playlist, in the Happy Ever After playlist group, I talk about all of Ernie's wives. Okay, Jason's agent, all of Ernie's wives and what happened and why he got divorced, from those wives. And it's like, I know everybody in my books so thoroughly.
Do
I
you
know
still
them.
know them, or do you kind of lose it as you move forward through the books? Like, does that really stay in your brain?
It does.
That's
It stays
incredible.
in my brain. Like, I feel like these are people that I like know, that I actually know. And I know all their side stories, and I know their families, and I know their friends, and I know their backstory. And I can see Terry is sharing in the chat. One of my group admins is sharing in the chat the link for that group if you guys want to join. But I know them very, 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 very well. And it's so fun because I just turned in my fourth book, Part of Your World. And it's pretty removed from the friend zone universe. It is still in the universe, but we're not going to see any of the characters from the first three books. But there are Easter eggs in that book that I've carried all the way from book one, all the way from the friend zone. There's things from the friend zone that are not, that you wouldn't even have noticed about the friend zone, that are now going to pop up in this fourth book, because all of these people are people that I know.
Yeah.
And they're all connected, and they're all interwound. And I have so much fun dropping those little Easter eggs for everybody.
I love that so much. I was honestly curious if Vanessa was like based on someone, because she felt so real to me. I mean, they all do, all of your characters do, but I think just with that being what we're talking about. But yeah, I love that they're just real people out there, like living their lives in this like very slightly different universe than ours. That's so
Yeah.
fun.
It's like an alternate universe, I suppose. And sometimes I do base characters or events in my books on real things that have happened to me. I can't always talk about those things
Yeah.
for privacy concerns. And I don't even know if those people would like recognize themselves in my book, but there are some scenes in Life's Too Short that have word for word happened to me. I can't tell you guys what they are, but maybe if I ever bump into a reader somewhere and you want to ask me, I'll tell you in person, but I won't ever write it down or like have it be recorded. But some of the things in Life's Too Short have happened to me.
Yeah.
And so Vanessa's thought process on it is very much my own thought process, because it's happened to me. But yeah, I love that everyone thinks my characters feel authentic, because they are so real to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really rare, everybody has strengths, right? But like, it's a really rare quality, I think, to find an author whose characters speak to you in that way, where you feel like, oh, I know these people, and like, I'm not experiencing this as a book. I'm experiencing this as like, oh, this is happening to my friend, which is how it feels. It's so lovely, and it's so special.
And see, that's how I felt when I read People We Meet on Vacation. And I read Bee Tree too after that. I read them out of order. And one thing with your books is right out of the gate, you just grab, like, I don't even know how you do it, but like right out of the gate, you just grab the reader. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love the first scene in People We Meet on Vacation where they're in the bar and she's pretending she doesn't know. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like so into this. But yeah, I love that you do that as well. Like you do that really, really, really well.
Thanks. I mean, as you know, as I already said, like the first chapter, it's so interesting because Adrian, this is not a spoiler, I don't think, because it's like page 1. He's like in bed with another woman, like trying to sleep when he hears Vanessa's niece crying next door. And like, honestly, even from that point, just being like, okay, so it's kind of a hard sell to open a romance book and the first 2 people you're seeing are the hero and like some other lady like whatever. And I was so like intrigued and fascinated by that, but then the second that he goes over to talk to Vanessa, I was like, okay, game on. Like this is, and yeah, I'm not going to give any spoilers, you guys will love it, don't worry about that being like, that's just a small piece of the book. And I also do want to mention, because I saw it pop up, somebody was talking about the dogs in your books and like what a delight those are, Harry Puppins. And is there anyone who inspires you when you're writing dogs?
It depends. Like, obviously I wrote Stuntman Mike into the friend zone. That's my real life dog. And I wrote him as he is. The Happy Ever After playlist, we have a duck tolling retriever, and a lot of my husband's friends have duck tolling retrievers. And I chose that dog because I wanted there to be that connection. I wanted Sloan to feel like the dog was a gift from Brandon. And he loved duck hunting. So it had to be a duck dog. And that dog was the perfect size to like jump through a sunroof. So that was why I picked that kind of
There's
dog.
just so many little things that people like wouldn't even know you would have to think about when you're planning your dogs in your books.
Yeah, and they're so cute. Tollers are so cute. They're just like, they're adorable. I love them. I follow so many of them on Instagram. And then for Harry Poppins, I wanted to really make Adrian uncomfortable. Like I just wanted
everyone uncomfortable.
I just wanted to give him like this really old geriatric, like, what is this dog? I mean, because Adrian, like, fancies himself like most men do, like, oh, bring me a dog I can take running, bring me a big dog, a masculine dog, a manly dog. And he gets this like toothless chihuahua that's like has worms and he's just like a mess. And then in my 4th book, I wrote a hunting dog into my 4th book, Part of Your World, because as you guys know, my husband has a hunting dog and that dog gives me so many problems. I talked about this last night with Casey too, but I mean, I wrote a lot of the things that Tess does to me. I wrote it into my 4th book. I love dogs so much. I think they can be an unending source of entertainment. And then plus the way that people interact with a dog is very telling. Like there's certain things that you can put in a book, like for example, somebody's living space, okay? How they live tells so much about them, where they live, what the inside of their, living space looks like. Like Josh in the friend zone. He was in a studio apartment, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, using a sleeping bag as a blanket, okay? Like that tells you a lot about Josh, right? Jason lived in a trailer because he doesn't have roots. The man's a nomad. Okay. And then, you've got Adrian in this very like sophisticated, very, well-appointed, very masculine apartment. And I feel like a dog and the way that you treat a dog is very indicative of somebody's character and their personality.
That doesn't necessarily like or trust you yet.
Yes. And I like doing these little, things where how the dog is reacting to you. Like whenever Sloan and Jason had a fight in the Happy Ever After playlist, Tucker always picked whoever's side I was on. So just so you know. So if Tucker stayed with Sloan, it's because,
That's such a fun Easter egg.
Yeah, because I want the reader to subtly know that Jason was wrong.
Yeah.
And that's how that works. So, I do those things in my books, and I love using dogs as that vehicle, just to show somebody's character or, how they are with something that is vulnerable and in need of your care,
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really just sweet, gentle moments in this book, and so much about caretaking in general. And it's really interesting because, I think I see online, there's like a big divide, I feel like, in readers who don't like having like a child or baby in like a romance story, and readers who tend to like really like that. And I'm like pretty neutral. But in this book, it just was such a perfect touch for Vanessa, who has this sort of like, freewheeling life. But to also see this person who's really adventurous and out there, and how she is with this helpless little baby, like, and
Mhm.
her delicate situation that she's in. And I honestly, like, I guess I hadn't really thought about thematically how Harry Poppins like works too, but I mean, there's just so many little careful details and touches in this book that really make it just shine. It's so good.
I really wanted there to be a found family theme in this book. So you've got Vanessa with this baby that's not her baby, and you have Adrian with this dog that's not his dog. And these characters come together and they're this family. They've got a baby and a dog, and they're like, a defunct, couple basically. So I loved that dynamic for them. I love that Adrian didn't come in already owning this dog, and it was like they're just a found family.
Just fit. Yeah. And I think, with the slow burn of it all too, it's just kind of like a rare thing, I think, to see that developing before the larger romantic feelings have really taken root, to just see how well they fit together and help each other, and just, I don't know, are there for each other.
Yeah, they were definitely such good friends before anything else developed. And this is a very delicious slow burn, as is People We Meet on Vacation. I was saying, like, there are so many parallels to your
Yeah,
book and my book. It was crazy. It
their
was like,
cousins for sure.
yeah, it was like somebody gave you and I a creative writing exercise and was like, okay, here's the deal. You need to write a book about a travel vlogger.
Yeah.
And he's a very, like, straight-laced guy, and she's kind of like, this pixie girl, and I need you to make that work. And it's like we just went and we wrote our books.
There was something in the air that we both picked up, and
Yes.
those, I mean, they just belong side by side, I think.
Yeah, I was like, I can't believe, like, all of the parallels.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I
even
just love
just
that.
that we both clearly love writing dialogue. Like, I could have just read conversations for days, between Vanessa and Adrian, just the humor, but also I think the tenderness and the way that you just seamlessly slip between those two. It feels very real. And it's like, that's how these two people really belong to each other, I think, is like the way that they can so easily talk about, not easily, it's hard. Life is hard and dredging up your past is hard, but the way that they can move from just having fun together to like sharing their deepest fears and hurts is just, yeah, it's so special. Um, what was your, I know we only have a couple more minutes till we're going to move to audience questions. So if you have one, make sure you hit the Q&A and ask that. But I do want to ask what your favorite and least favorite part of writing is, or maybe even just being an author, whichever your answers call to you.
I really enjoy writing when I feel like writing, when I feel like I'm ready to write, when I feel like I know my characters. I really like getting edits back from my editor. Like, I love the challenge of getting the edits. Like, okay, let me backtrack. When you get the edits, when you get the email, there's like this sense of dread. Okay. Yeah. And you're like, oh God, what's in there? Okay. And you get all freaked out and you're like, you kind of pace in front of your computer and you're afraid to open it up and look at it. But then once I open it up and I look at it, no matter how many changes are requested, I always like rally. Yeah. And I get kind of excited to like.
I mean, you clearly love a challenge. That's, yeah, the vibe of your whole life story here, is like, you like to try new things and master them.
Yes. So it's like, while I'm sad that I have to rewrite some things, I actually do enjoy that part of it, like having to figure it out basically, and having to make it work, and like, figure out how she wants it done and returning it to her. So I actually really like that part. And my editor is so great about helping me get into that headspace where I am ready to sit down and crank things out. Like, she has these like 2-hour long phone calls with me where like we go over like, well, what do you think of this? And what do you think of that? And, should we do this or should we do that? And so by the time I hang up with her, I feel like, okay, I know where I'm going with this. I'm ready to go. So that's been so helpful. It's really great having an editor.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about that all the time. Like, I really respect people who go the self-publishing route, but I'm just like, I would be so lost. I cannot do that. I need that person.
I would. I don't think I would do it. Honestly, I don't think I could do it. I don't think I have it in me.
Me neither. Hi.
Wait, are both of you ready for questions?
Sure.
We have quite a few pending, so get ready. So the first one is from Stephanie, who asks Abby, of the three main men you've introduced to us in your novels, do you have a favorite?
Ooh.
I got this question last night too, and you guys are not going to like my answer because my favorite hero is Daniel Grant in Part of Your World, which is my next book, and that's coming out next year.
Cheating, Abby.
But if you want me to really tell you, I don't know. I love Josh just because he was like so Josh, he was so vulnerable and just sweet and, like, I don't know, Josh is like hugging a t-shirt, I love him. But Adrian really does something for me. Like he's just this very capable, um, just a very capable human being. And I just personally find that really attractive. Like that's how my husband is. My husband is extremely capable. My husband can like get shit done. And I really value that. So for me, like, I don't know, I guess I'd have to say maybe Adrian. If I had to choose from those three, I'd say probably Adrian.
So this question is for Emily, also from Stephanie. Emily, as a fellow Ohio girl, do you plan to keep mentioning Ohio in your novels? I love and adore it when you do.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I mean, I think my first couple of books have really been like homages to place, and I don't really feel like I can write about any place that I don't have like a pretty intimate knowledge of, because I'm too paranoid about getting it wrong. So there will definitely be more Ohio books. But I also, like we were talking earlier, like when, you were saying when restaurants shuttered, Abby, that you would take them out. I'm so like weirdly, even before COVID, I was so weirdly paranoid about that sort of thing that I mostly will write something that's very specifically a place, but then I'll change the name of it. So it's like, kind of one step removed from reality, because I'm just like, what if they go out of business? Or what if, I get this thing wrong, or I want to make up the owners of this business and have them not be the real people, whatever. But yeah, there will be more Ohio books for sure.
Abby, this question is from Michelle, who wants to know if your books can be read as standalones, or do you think it would be better if they were read together in order?
They can definitely be read as a standalone. Let's say that, that an infertility story is going to be triggering for you. So you don't necessarily want to read The Friend Zone. You totally don't have to. Each book can be read by itself. Now, if that's not a trigger for you, I do recommend reading them in order. The Friend Zone, the Happy Ever After playlist, and then Life's Too Short, because each book leads into the other and each character will have more depth if you read all three. And if you are planning on doing that, if you haven't read anything from me before, do not even read the back cover of the Happy Ever After playlist. Don't look at anything. Just read The Friend Zone, and then you can look at the Happy Ever After playlist, because there's going to be major spoilers right on the cover for the first book. So, but yeah, if you can, I definitely recommend reading them in order, just because, like I said, you'll get so much more out of it. There's cameos from the characters from the first two books in Life's Too Short. And you'll just love that when it happens, if you know those people when they show up.
Michelle has a question for Emily about which book of yours would you consider to be your baby, since you have quite a big backlist.
Yeah. So this isn't in my adult career. My adult career. That sounds like I'm talking about something very. So yeah, I published some young adult books before I published books for adults. And my by far least popular, least liked book of my career, probably forever, is called When the Sky Fell on Splendor, and it is set in Ohio. And that book I think all of them feel very, very, very close to my heart. And there's always something that's like pulled directly from my life or my heart for each book. But that book was the one that's like a complete homage to the people that I grew up with in my childhood. And yeah, that it's funny because that I do always say like, that's my favorite book of mine and your least favorite book. That's like my pitch for it.
Abby Christina asks, in what ways, if any, has your fan base impacted your writing?
Oh my gosh. They do impact my writing. I see what they love, and that helps me to know what I should put in my next books, I guess you can say, because I want to please them. I want to make them happy. I want to give them what they want. So yeah, I mean, I definitely listen to them, and they're just like so amazing. Like I
Yeah.
feel like I have this army. Like I really feel like I have an army out there. Like, you know, they tell me when they see my books in stores. Like I feel like I know everything. I feel like I have like thousands of eyes like all over the United States, because like they're everywhere and they tell me everything. You know, like just one example, somebody was listening to the audiobook of Life's Too Short, and they noticed that there was a mispronunciation of a Minnesota word in the book. Well, I listened to the audiobook on Audible, and that mispronunciation wasn't there. It's because on the Libro app, they didn't fix it. They fixed it on the other, they fixed it on every other app, but the Libro app didn't upload properly or didn't get changed. And it's like, I know this very minuscule thing that happened only on one version of the audiobook because my readers just tell me everything, and it's so helpful. But yeah, I love my readers. Like my husband just shakes his head. He's like, they're freaking amazing. I'm like, I know. Aren't they the coolest? Which is why I like to do things. I like to thank them in whatever way I can. Like, you know, signing 1,200 books and like going down to the freight warehouse and picking them up so that they get their books on time, because I just like these small things that I can do just to thank them for all the support they've given me. It's like my pleasure to do those things. So yeah, I love my readers, and they do impact the way that I write for sure.
So Carissa has a bit of a craft question for Abby. I have a question in terms of your writing process. You are able to think the story through, then write it out. But do you ever struggle with different paths that your characters could take? Do you ever have an alternate storyline? And how do you decide which path your character would or should take?
By the time I write my books, I really know where it's going. The only time that I deviate from the path that I have, because I really don't sit down and I don't just sit down and, you know, write when I'm not ready to write. I know what's going to happen. The only time that I deviate from the path that I have in my brain is when my editor tells me I have to deviate from the path in my brain. And then I take different path. So, I mean, you know, no, there really isn't like alternate universes, you know, in which Adrian maybe would have done this one thing, or I struggled with, you know, him. Like the broad strokes are always figured out for me. There might be tiny little choices here or there that, you know, I maybe thought, well, maybe he could do this instead of that. But the broad strokes are always in my brain before I even sit down and write. One example would be, you know, in Life's Too Short, Adrian was going to have a girlfriend a lot longer. And this is not a spoiler because we find out right away, right out of the gate, like chapter 1, what happens with Adrian and the girlfriend we meet him with. But that was going to go on for a lot longer into the book. And I actually took that out, and they break up right away. So, I mean, in that case, like, you know, there's little deviations from my original plans, but it's usually based on my editor's feedback, not really me struggling with which way to take it.
That's why you need an editor, because then you don't have to struggle, because you might not have that thought right off the bat. You might just be like, this is how it happens.
Yeah.
So speaking of Adrian, Emily asks Abby, which of your characters do you most identify with? I would love to be a Kristen, but I am definitely an Adrian.
I mean, I identify with all of them in different ways for sure. I feel like Kristen is like my internal monologue, but Sloane is like my outer presentation, because I'm very not like a confrontational person. I don't like to draw attention to myself. I'm very introverted. I'm very much the kind of person who like gets flustered. Like, you guys know, my best friend Lindsay, she's always sending me like crazy stuff in the mail. And I'm like, you know, getting embarrassed and blushing, you know, and like, because I get flustered easily. So I don't know. I feel like, you know, again, like I outward present as Sloane, but my internal monologue is Kristen. And then there's little bits and pieces of me in all of my characters, really, even the male characters.
So something for your publicity team next time, your lovely publicist Estelle, if she's listening, probably. I think next book you should make like a quiz of like which Abby Jimenez character are you as part of like some promo. Estelle, you can have that idea for free. I think that'd be great. So I was like, thank you. Alyssa asks, Abby, you seem so calm. Do you ever get stressed out while writing, or does it basically come naturally, allowing for not much stress?
I have my routine down now pretty well. So, and I'm so far ahead. Like one thing when I signed my new book deal, one thing that I requested was that I don't publish more than one book a year. And the reason why I don't want to publish more than one book a year is because I don't want that stress. I don't want to feel rushed. I feel like you can tell when you read a book from an author who was rushed or wasn't in the right headspace to write that book, like you can tell. And I don't ever want to be that author. So, for me, like work-life balance is very important to me. Getting it right is super important to me. So, I've created these boundaries for myself, like one book a year, and the book's going to be kick ass, but you guys are just going to get one. And because I've laid that groundwork, I don't get stressed. I'm super ahead. Like I just said, I'm working on book 5. I'm already like maybe 125 pages into my 5th book, which doesn't even come out until 2023. So, several years, I'm very, very, very ahead. So no, I don't really get stressed, but it's because again, I set groundwork and boundaries for myself.
So Christina asks, Abby, did you intentionally decide to cover these really heavy issues in each book, or did it happen more by chance?
When I wrote the Happy Ever After playlist, if you guys read the author's note at the back of that book, that Sloane's struggle in that book was based loosely on something I observed in a very, very close friend of mine who lost her husband at a very early age. And I really wrote that book as a way to sort of like work through what I was observing. And I didn't even realize what I was writing was complicated grief until a beta reader read it and said, oh my God, you did such a good job with a complicated grief. And I was like, oh, what's that? And I Googled it and I was like, oh my gosh, it has a name. I was just writing what I saw basically. So for me, I was writing the way that I felt seeing this challenge with my friend. And for me, I always kind of feel like Sloane is me. So when I went to write Sloane's best friend story, it just felt natural for me to write my own best friend's struggle into that book and my best friend's struggle with infertility. Lindsay had a full hysterectomy by the age of just 29. She struggled with severe uterine fibroids. The infertility story in the friend zone is word for word what happened to my best friend, from start to finish, exactly what happened to my best friend. So I just kind of by default, that was her challenge in the friend zone because I was really writing my own best friend into that book. In terms of Life's Too Short, like I said, I wanted to give Adrienne the ultimate loss of control, and what, bigger loss of control could there be than somebody who might not be alive in a year, and falling in love with somebody like that. My 4th book, Part of Your World, is the focus in that book, or the struggle in that book, is around domestic violence. So, I'm always going to address tough issues because these are real issues that real women deal with and experience. And I think that's what makes these books feel real, is because you're reading about people that have challenges that you have in your own life in a lot of the cases.
And this is like a good connected question that Terry asks, what was the hardest scene to write in any of your books?
Wow. That one scene in the friend zone. And I'm not going to say it in case there's people here that haven't read the friend zone, but it's like, I went into that book knowing what I had to do. I went into that book because the next book was already written. So I knew exactly what was going to happen in the friend zone.
It does hit you like a ton of bricks, like when
it really does. And I went into it like, got to do this thing. I mean, it wasn't pleasant for me, I love those characters too. And it was hard. Yeah, I don't want to give any spoilers, but that was a very, very tough scene to write.
That was a moment where I had to like put the book down for a second, do like a lap around my apartment, get a drink of water. Yeah, it was rough. But I think like good writers really elicit strong emotions with like a reader.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, you can throw the book, just like go get it.
You can throw the book.
Pick it up or dust it off.
Don't hit anything.
Just know that with romance, if you guys are not romance readers, just know that in romance, you are required as an author to give the reader a happy for now or happy ever after. So for the most part, your main characters are safe. Okay. At the end, you will be made whole. However you get there, you will be made whole. So just know that. And that's what's so great about romance is, the author can take you on this journey where it's scary and, your heart's pounding and you're so worried for them. But there's that guarantee at the end that you will be made whole.
And now, one last question, probably the most important question that we've gotten, and a question I think everyone is wondering about, from Marla. Will Stuntman Mike make an appearance tonight?
He said, I'll text a kid and I'll have her bring him down. Let's see if she's going to check her phone. I blocked him up because he's so bad.
Post him on Instagram right after this if you cannot get him, if his schedule is too busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's upstairs. I can hear him barking up there. He's like, let me out. Why am I locked up? I'm a star.
Maybe talk to his agent.
Yeah, I just text her. We'll see if she's checking her phone.
While
Okay.
we're waiting for Stuntman, what are the both of you reading and loving right now that you want other romance readers to know about?
I just read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I would love.
Ooh, that one's a good one.
It was so good. Michael, come here. Come here. Maya, can you pick him up and hand him to me? When I reach down to get him, he runs. I don't know, like he had no chill. You're my kid. He had no chill. Screaming whole time. Michael. Yeah, I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I absolutely love the book.
There he is in his little tie.
He was really dressed for the event.
Oh, Michael, he's always dressed.
He's always dressed.
You were with the other dogs like a peasant.
Oh, you never have to do that.
Hi.
I am currently reading, before I forget, I'm reading Evie Dunmore's new book, which actually, Portrait of a Scotsman. I couldn't remember because I just started reading it. It's very, very good. If you like historical romance, comes out probably, I think, later this summer. So make sure that's also on your radar.
Well, look at his face.
I want to get the little like tongue action,
Oh.
Oh, he did.
There it is.
Thank you, Mike.
What a great note to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much, Abby and Emily. This was so much fun. Abby, congratulations on your release. Thank you to Stuntman Mike for taking time out of his busy schedule, obviously, to grace us with his presence. Emily's book comes out in May 11th, I believe.
Yep.
It sounds like many of you have Abby's book already, but if you don't, you can buy them from us or any of Abby's backlist. If you need to catch up, you can also pre-order Emily's book at the link in the chat. If you tuned in late, that is okay, because we record these and it will go up on our YouTube channel within 48 hours, so you can catch up on what you've missed. Thank you both so much, Abby, Emily, and thank you to everyone who stuck around, spent time with us, asked questions. This was really fun.
Thank you.
Yes.
Bye. Have a good night.